Hello and welcome to the One Life Church devotional series where we cover the entire Bible in 20 months. Today's chapters are Revelation chapter 7 and Isaiah 41, where God has a word for those in the coastlands. Now the coastlands are a word for the nations of the world. In the original Hebrew, it describes the islands and the faraway lands, essentially the idol worshippers. And God here is allowing them an opportunity to come and present their case. And then God reasons with them. In verse 8, though, he switches to Israel and he says, you are entirely different. You're altogether different. And God is your help. One of the most encouraging verses in this chapter. Verse 10, so do not fear. He's talking to his people. For I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. And so he goes on to say, God has abundant resources. You don't have to worry. He calls the idol worshippers to trial. He says that they are worthless and that mankind is so limited. And so it's this comparison between his people and the idol worshippers and his backing of his people, greatly encouraging. Now in Revelation 7, John's attention moves from Jesus opening the seals. He's opened 6. The 7th will be opened in chapter 8. And he looks up to heaven and he sees multitudes worshiping God. And he sees angels worshiping God. This is the actual scene though. He sees 4 angels. Their task is to hold back the elements. Remember the 6th seal? The elements were getting out of control on planet Earth. And then the 5th angel, he's got a specific task. He was given a task concerning 144,000 people to seal them. That was his task, to seal them. Now, it says in verse 4, I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000. Now, cults have got very excited about this number 144. The JWs, for example, believe that that's the exact number of people that will be in heaven, that multitudes will live in a paradise on earth, and that the unfaithful will wind up in torment. But the Christian church doesn't believe that. The Christian church has 2 views on this. One is that the 144,000 are end-time Jews. Some say even Jewish evangelists. And the other view, which is the one that I personally hold, is that that number is symbolic and it represents all God's people. And let me tell you why I think it's symbolic. Well, firstly, if you go through all the tribes, Dan's missing. It can't be a complete list of Jews. In addition to that, Paul has made it very clear in his writings that the 2 have become one. Israel and God's people, the church, are joined together. The only reason he separates them is to show that the 2 have become one. Now, the 12 Old Testament leaders of the tribes and the 12 apostles, you put them together and that's 144. 10,000 is the number of completion, and so 144,000 to me anyway represents all believers, whoever it is though. You don't need to squabble over these things. It's God is holding things back until that number has been sealed or saved. So in other words, what's the seal? Some people say the seal is like the glory of God, like we saw with Moses. Others say that it's the Holy Spirit. Others say it's an actual mark. I'm not too sure that it's an actual mark on the forehead of people living. No, I think it is something of the Holy Spirit, the glory of God. And now, if it's not a literal mark, if the 144,000 have not got an actual mark, if that's symbolic, then in later chapters when we read about another mark, that could also be symbolic, couldn't it? Just a question, just asking. But whatever you think, whether it's a literal mark or whether it's the glory of God, they were wearing white robes, which is a symbol of purity. And they were waving palm branches, which means it's a bit of a party going on there. And then we see the party. They crowd out in a loud voice, salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. So different to the trauma we saw on earth in chapter 6, isn't it? And then a new song is sung. This is the 7th new song that we see in this book of Revelation. Then one of the elders asked me, who are these in white robes and where do they come from? I answered, sir, you know. And he said, these are those who've come out of the great tribulation and had their robes washed and made white by the blood of the Lamb. Who are these people? Well, these are the people who have suffered. They've lost their jobs for the kingdom. They've lost their spouse. They've starved. They've been thrown out as refugees. Their dads have been fired because they would not sin. Their moms have been ridiculed and mocked. They gave all they had to the people in need. They went through hell on earth, and God has said they've come through this, and now they are going to be dancing in heaven and absolute victory. And he will lead them to springs of living water, it says in verse 15, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. So it's like John has been looking at the seals, the havoc on earth. He pauses for a moment before the 8th seal. He looks up into heaven and he says, look at this. Angels are holding things back. God is going to be saving people. They're going to be sealed. They're going to be ushered into the kingdom. They're going to be worshiping for all eternity. A beautiful picture of the destiny of us while there's mayhem going on here around us. Chapter 8, next week.